Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Celebrate with L.A. Williams. My name is L.A. Williams, and I am so honored and excited to bring to you this very, very special episode. Today, we are celebrating the one and only Mr. KenMatts Martin.
Hello,
KenMatts,
hello.
how are you, my friend? How are you?
I'm good. I'm well. I'm truly so excited to be able to be here with you and just have a conversation. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to be on a show that's talking about celebration, and because we're in a time where it feels like there's sometimes very little to celebrate. So anytime we talk about things in the framework of celebration, I'm always excited. But anyway, happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to have you. Thank you for saying yes to this. Before we get into a slightly deeper introduction of you, I would like to take a few seconds to talk about what Celebrate is and what it means to me, if that's okay with you.
Sure, please.
So this series is a manifestation of a moment I had as a very young theater student at Alabama State University. It was my first semester on campus, my first time in a theater watching a play. I knew nothing about acting, drama, theater, any of it. And I had gone over to the building to see a production of a play called Phaedra by Jean Racine, and it was directed by Professor Dr. Tommy Stewart.
Yes,
and
shout out to Dr. Stewart. If people don't know who Dr. Stewart is, shout out to Dr. Stewart.
Shout out to Dr. Stewart. But you know, we're gonna have a Dr. Stewart episode coming up. But I wanted to. I remember thinking while watching that experience, it was one of those things where I was like, I'm clearly bitten by the bug. I know what I want to do now. Like, oh my God, I want to know everything about what's happening on this stage. But I also had several moments throughout that weekend of seeing the show over and over and over, where I kept thinking, I've got to find a way to say thank you to everybody involved in this production. I've got to let them know what they have done for me by putting this show on. Child, I just feel it every single time I think about it. Yeah. And that was truly the genesis of Celebrate, me wanting to say thank you and to just go up and honor the folks who had done such incredible work. Cut to 2012, I'm living in New York, and I had this sort of divine inspiration to start this sort of interview platform where I sit down with some of those people whose work has really inspired me and kind of listen to them talk about their journeys and some of the transformative moments in their lives. And so that's when I began doing this form of Celebrate. And here we are 10 years later. As you know, we're like pulling through this pandemic. We are like doing the thing, reopening Broadway and all this other stuff. And I decided, I made a personal commitment last fall to go out and see shows. I was like, you know what? If people are going to be on the stages, I'm going to be in the seats, you know, supporting my people, supporting artists. And I'm so glad I did, because I got to see some incredible work by some always amazing artists. But I also got to go out into like director gatherings. And that's where I think you and I met in person.
Yeah.
And it felt so beautiful and so divine, KenMatts, because I really, of course, had heard about you, but I really wanted to just wrap my arms around you from the moment I learned that you would become the new artistic director of Victory Gardens Theater in Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have this moment with you to say thank you, KenMatts, for stepping into this incredible leadership role for all of us. It is not lost on me or anybody what you are doing, especially at this time. Yeah. And I wanted to say congratulations to you and to your organization. They are very lucky to have you. I'm very clear on that. That's not lost on me either. And spending time with you in that director's gathering, just a short amount of time, I was so inspired by your clarity of vision, by your intention, and just by your energy. I was like, oh yes, we are all in luck to have a spirit and an energy like this leading an American theater. So that's why I wanted to have you on. I wanted to celebrate you, listen to you talk about your journey, and just love on you. And I'm gonna love on you so much, so get ready.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, wow. I'm just excited for the conversation now. Wow, yeah.
I love that. I love that. The way I like to start these off, KenMatts, is by asking the guest to start off by celebrating the day you were born. And the idea behind that question is to have you take us back as far as you want us to go, to wherever you want us to go, and talk to us either about your birth story, early memory, young time growing up, all the things.
Wow. Oh, wow. That's such a fun, I don't think I've ever gotten a question quite like that before. I am a Scorpio. October 27th is my birthday. I don't tell people the year because that's not your business.
That's right. Exactly.
But you know, it's funny when you talk about even early memories and things like that in particular, I think what feels really, really present for me is I'm the son of a pastor. I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas, born and raised. And some of my earliest and most distinct memories, right? Like many Black folks, especially Black Southern folk like myself, are directly connected to the church and connected to experiences of community and fellowship, right? And so when I think about like what is my birth and everything, I'm very, very proud to be from Little Rock. And I think for people who may not know anything about Little Rock or may not be familiar with that part of the country and Arkansas as a whole, it's a very, very unique place that I'm really proud to have grown up in. It's a majority Black city, so I grew up in an environment where I was never the minority, literally, right? Like my principal at my elementary school was Black. My principal in junior high, high school, they were all Black. My teachers were mostly Black. Like, you know, I had classmates that were kind of a mix, but still majority Black, you know? And so when I think about what is my origin and my birth story, I think a lot about Little Rock in particular. And I think about some of those earliest memories was being surrounded by a plethora and array of different types of powerful Black people. And what I mean by that is that when I say powerful, like, sure, there were plenty of like doctors and lawyers and judges and stuff like that I met, but they were just as important to me as, you know, Miss Felicia who worked at the post office, or they were important to me as, you know, the many different pastors and different form of other church, you know, related folks in my life. And I was always just raised thus with the sense of like awareness and understanding of that who I was something to always be proud of, frankly. And it wasn't until undergrad and like later in my life that I even found myself in predominantly white spaces. And then I was confused because I didn't know what that meant. And I had never been in that environment really. So that's, you know, when I think about my birth, it's like Little Rock is the thing that feels the most present. And being in a city where I felt protected and seen at all times. You know, went to Little Rock Public Schools. Shout out to also other Little Rock Public School alums in this business, Steve Broadnex, Gillian Glasgow, Freddie Fulton, all of us out here doing our thing. And then other folks from Little Rock too, who I'm sure will kill me for forgetting them. But in particular, I want to shout out those of us who came through Little Rock Public Schools because, you know, it was a great place to grow up that allowed us to be creative and also live in our full Blackness at all times. And I didn't understand how much of a rarity that was until I moved away and got a little older.
Whew, child, thank you. Thank you, KenMatts, for that beautiful depiction of life in Little Rock. And thank you for celebrating the Miss Felicias at the post office and the public school system, which is so important, right? That we take moments to celebrate the public school systems that allowed us to do and be and grow and learn and all the things. So thank you for that. I feel like there was one tiny thing that jumped out at me from listening to you. Either way, I want to jump into a little bit more about sort of in the home. Like, were you the only child? Like, what was the structure of your family growing up? Were you the oldest, the youngest? And what was it like being a young KenMatts in the house?
Yeah, I mean, so I have one biological brother, my little brother Seth, Seth Martin, who is a pastor as well now, like my dad, and is doing all right for himself as well with his beautiful family. And then I also, in addition to my folks, like many, you know, I grew up. Both of my parents are originally from smaller towns in Arkansas, so a big part of my childhood was actually spending a lot of time with my grandparents, who helped raise me as well, especially on my mother's side, in this little itty bitty small town called Darnell, Arkansas. So a lot of my childhood was spent with my little brother, as well as all of my cousins and like other kind of larger extended family, if you will, between my grandmother's house in Darnell, Arkansas, my grandmother and grandfather's house, and, you know, Little Rock. And then in addition to that, my parents have always been, you know, public servants, literally in their own right, but also have been big-hearted people. So we had a lot of other children and other what became siblings of mine come in and out of the house as a kid growing up. And so I have a lot of like sisters and brothers who would stay with us for a while and would be, you know, still considered family. Like when we have holidays, it's always inclusive of those other extended kind of adopted family members, both literally and metaphorically, because my parents just always were interested in being of service and helping others. So while I technically grew up as the oldest, it never really felt that way because there were so many other people
People
around.
around, yeah.
And in particular, older siblings, like especially my older sister, Tanikis, who's like actually the one that's like the closest that really kind of literally grew up with us. You know, so even though I'm biologically the oldest, there are a lot of other people
Love
around
that.
that kind of made up the sibling situation. So I grew up in a very, you know, in a city, in an environment, and in a household where it felt like a lot of people raised me, frankly, that literal village, you know, if you go up in the church and everything else too, you know. And so when I think about what was my childhood and like little me growing up, to your question, it was always one of like kind of floating between, you know, the various different members of our community and our family as a whole. And then, you know, on top of that, I was always, I would say, I was always a little bit of a performer, you know, like before I even really knew what that meant, or before I actually got bit by the theater bug, like a little bit later. Well, first the TV bug, then the theater bug. But like, so yeah, so I was always, I was always, I was dancing around, I was singing,
Yeah.
I was doing all, you know, and I was a part of that larger community and village and family that like allowed me the space to be that little creative, you know, kid in that way.
I was going to ask you, when would you say you sort of came into performing? Like, did you do a show as a young child or something like that? Or when did you know, like, I am an artist? And when did other people start noticing it?
Yeah, well, actually, this connects to some Alabama State stuff a little bit, actually. You know, I have such a great affinity for so many of the people who went through that amazing program. It's been like some of my dearest, closest friends in this industry and parts of my life. And so when I was 11, I went and saw a production of the piano lesson at the Arkansas Repertory Theater. I don't know if I was actually 11. I always say 11. I don't know if that's actually true. I might have been like 12 or some child. I don't know. But, you know, when I was a kid, when I was younger, I went and saw this production of the piano lesson at the Arkansas Repertory Theater, starring J. Bernard Calloway as Boy Willie. Folks know the great actor who, you know, but at that time he was like, I think a couple years out of like grad school and was just like doing a gig, you know, playing Boy Willie and the piano lesson. And it literally changed my life. Like I remember seeing that show. It was on a school field trip and being like, I don't know what this is. I don't fully understand it, but I know I want something to do with it.
Right.
And so I was fortunate. I went to, like I said, shout out to Little Rock Public Schools, Horseman Junior High, which was a performing arts magnet, you know, junior high. And it allowed me the chance to start like taking acting classes at school and whatnot. And so essentially what ended up happening in terms of how my kind of career actually started and whatnot, there was at the time a contest called "Are You the Funniest Kid in America?" to find a new cast member for the television show All That on Nickelodeon, and so they were advertising, you know, for this show, and my little brother saw it, and I just was like, I want to audition for that. I didn't know what that actually meant or like knew like none of it. I didn't actually know, other than I was like, I should do that because I felt like I should do it at 12 or 13 or whatever I was. And so I went and I begged my mom, and the closest place, because mind you, this is before smartphones and like all this other stuff. So like the closest place, like you had to go to audition. We're in Little Rock. Like the closest place that are having auditions to us was Atlanta. And so my mom and her best friend Finay, shout out to Finay, and my little brother Seth, we all got in our car, and we couldn't afford a hotel room or like anything like that. So my mom did this crazy turnaround trip where we drove from Little Rock to Atlanta, and I changed in like a McDonald's parking lot and went in and I auditioned for this show. And then we literally drove back. And then before I'd even made it home, they'd already called and asked me to come in for a callback. And so that kind of started this crazy journey where essentially what happened was I didn't win the contest. Like I didn't get to end up being the like full cast member, but I did get to be on the show, and it got me an agent. And so then that started a whole kind of like part of my life from 12 to 25, where I just was a working professional actor, like pretty much my entire life. Like it like that happened. And then there are other random TV things, lots of commercials. Like, so there's stuff out there that I'm sure if anyone ever cared or looked hard enough, people could dig up of like me from like 12 to 25 doing everything from like the most random commercials and voiceovers you've ever heard of, to like playing that sick child in a hospital ad. It's horrible things too out there that I was like, now like in my adult life, I look back like, why did they have me hooked up to those machine boards at like 15 in this bed? There's something out there. It's like a commercial for the children's hospital. Like I truly, like, I mean, so that was my career. And then I was simultaneously, I discovered musical theater because I could sing and dance and stuff. And so I started in my teenage years doing more musical theater, which is when I started working at the Arkansas Rep, just a Lord. And Bob Hupp, shout out to Bob Hupp, who's now the artistic director of Syracuse Stage. He was the then artistic director at the Arkansas Rep. He let me literally just kind of follow him around from the time that I was 15. And like, I've been in board meetings for, Lord theaters and marketing conversations and rehearsals. So I was kind of groomed to be an AD, though I didn't fully understand it at that point, that's what it was. But in addition to everything else that I was doing as a kid, as an actor, Bob really let me have like an access to the Arkansas Rep to learn how Lord Theater works from a teenager, and to get to follow him around as producing artistic director to see how he did his job. So that's really where the seeds got planted to get to like where I am now, which is something that I don't think many people know or realize about my journey. So that's the quick Cliff Notes version of like how that all started.
Okay.
I know it's a lot.
I'm like trying to gather myself, first of all, emotionally, and also like keep my brain together, because there's so much juiciness in what you just shared.
Yeah.
And so much richness. So a couple things. One, KenMatts, I really want to take a second to pause,
sure,
and celebrate with you, and you celebrate with me. A couple things. One, the fact that you, as a 12-year-old, or however young you were, saw a thing about an audition and had a moment within yourself to be like, I want that. I want to go out for that, is not something that we can skip over. That's brilliant. Right. And then to have the like wherewithal to then and go and say something to your parents about it, your mama be like, yo, and to try to put it into action, I think says a whole lot about you, then and now. But also, let's take a moment to celebrate mommy and Miss Renee. Right.
Yeah.
And car ride. Right.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. And I have to just pull this out a little bit. Like, that kind of support, and I talk a lot about this on the series, like that kind of support is not normal.
No.
It's not. No. Everybody doesn't have it.
No.
And it's worth really celebrating the fact that your mother and her friend and your brother was like, let's go.
Yeah.
And not having the money to pay for a hotel to stay overnight, but like, we're going to do this. Just the amount of support, and like you said earlier, when you're talking about growing up, the community, the villageness of it all.
Yeah.
All right, let's go do this thing. And how that led you to all these wonderful opportunities and this exposure and this experience. And the other thing that's so super present in my mind right now is that, like, wow, you were a full-on professional at 13, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I mean,
yeah, that's the thing that I think a lot of people, I'll be candid. I think, there's what I call the perception of youth, and there's my literal youth, right? Where people look at me and they perceive me maybe to be younger than I actually am. And there's also the literal youth, i.e. I'm still in my 30s, right? And not my 40s or 50s doing this, that I don't think people understand. Like, this is cumulative. This is a 20 plus year career of like, I was 13 arguing with my agent about contract stuff, like I was, like 15, 16, like, in the Lord rehearsal rooms, navigating things, as Bob's assistant on shows, right? So it's a cumulative, this is all I've ever known, really. It's all I've ever done. And I think the other side of that is that I also got to know the nasty side of this business early, because I also went through this period where the thing that's nuanced about my story with the whole Nickelodeon thing and all of that was that people don't realize that for every like child star, right? Like every successful child star, there's like 15 or 20 other kids in that waiting room. And for every kid that like gets the role and does the thing, there's like the kid who almost got it. And so much of my career from like 12 to like 18, 19 was me being the kid who almost got it. Right? Like the amount of studio sessions that I did and the screen tests and everything else as like a child actor. And that still is like a muscle, right? Yes. Where it's like, that's why I'm not precious about just about anything. Like, I'm not really phased by like rejection or when things have to shift and all of that, because I built those muscles at like 12, 13, 14, 15 of being like, I was almost a kid in that one movie. Like there's movies that still to this day will come on, and people who I'm not saying names, but like
Yeah,
people
of
who are
course.
mega famous now, who like we came up around the same time. I used to like our moms used to chat in the dressing in the waiting room or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, and people who I like have been able to watch their beautiful careers bloom into other things. And so all of that to say, it was a great way to grow up. Like I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful that God was like, nope, not this thing. In terms
Yeah.
of me becoming, because it set me up and
It
prepared me,
all set you
you
up for
know, to
this.
like
Yeah.
be able to soak up all that knowledge and energy,
Yeah.
so that now that I am doing what I now do, I'm able to
Yeah.
look at it from a more holistic way and with some
Holistic.
experience under my belt. You know, like I know
Yeah.
what 8 shows a week feels like. I know
Yeah.
what having to try to juggle shooting that commercial while also trying to make your call time to like do the thing feels like. I know. Yeah. So anyway, that's just the
Phew.
perspective it gave me.
Okay. Couple things, Kemet. The cumulativeness of it all. Thank you
Mhm.
for that wisdom.
Yeah.
And it's so present clearly in your story and in your journey. The other thing I want to pause and celebrate is Bob.
Yeah. Shout out to Bob, yo.
Shout out to Bob, because I think a lot about, you know, leadership in the American theater and how we get to a more equitable, representative sort of
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
And I think about mentorship in that
Yeah.
context, right? And that, first of all, that makes so much sense. Just hearing you talk about having had the experience at such a young, or an early age, and these years of experience, and that leading you to where you are makes so much sense. But also just Bob, thank you, Bob, thank you, Bob, thank you, Bob, for the
I
access, for
mean,
the mentorship, for the
yeah.
guidance and the access. You know, I think that's really what it comes down to. I love that you talk about being in meetings as a teenager. I mean, that's so effing important, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's why I'm not intimidated by, and I haven't been intimidated by any of the other things that I've been able to do later in my life and career,
Mm,
from Pyramid
mm,
to Williamstown to Goodman to Trinity
mm,
Prep to
mm.
now this. It's like, uh, I've been dealing with boards. I've been dealing with like meetings and all of that in my own way for such a long time. And it's just like,
And
oh, okay, let's see how
it's a
this.
part of the thing. I
Yeah.
love that. Can we talk a little bit more about the high school musical theater years and the work
Sure.
at Arkansas Rep?
Sure.
First of all, shout out to Arkansas Rep,
Yes.
just for
Shout out.
existing, right, and being
Yeah.
a space
Uh-huh.
um, that nourished folks like you. And yes, for J. Bernard Calloway, I just love that. I love that you mentioned that
Yeah.
name. What a wonderful, brilliant artist. Um, Talk to me more about that experience. Like, so what was it like transitioning from commercials and TV into like musical theater?
It was really fun, honestly. Like I was a kid still, you know? So like to me, it
Mm,
was just like
mhm.
I had this like life where I like almost became like famous or whatever that
Mhm,
means, and almost got
mhm,
to like doing the TV thing. But I always found myself a little bored, you know,
mhm,
with that world, and feeling like the hurry up and wait of it always felt a little
mhm,
like, oh, okay, I guess I'm
mm,
here. And
mm,
then I always knew that I could sing. I could, you know, come from a family of churchy folk, and there's,
mhm,
you know, a handful of us that are singers in the family and whatnot.
mm,
And I knew that I could move pretty well. I wasn't the
mm,
best dancer, to be
mhm,
candid, when I first like fell into that world, and then I became a better dancer, as
mhm,
one does after just doing a bunch of shows and like
mhm,
figuring it out. I had rhythm and I could move, so I figured it
mhm,
out, you know. And then I
mm,
trained and did all of that stuff. And so, you know, the cool thing about the Arkansas Rep during that period, I have to shout out Nicole Capri, who was
mm,
the director of education during that period, that started this amazing musical theater intensive that like to
mm,
this day there are a bunch of people out here killing it on
mhm,
Broadway and in the national tour world who came through that program. Like shout
mhm,
out to Chad Burris, who
mhm,
was like in Frozen and Book of Mormon and is doing Almost Famous right now and all these other musicals. Belinda Allen, who's I can't even keep up with what all she's up to at the moment.
mm,
Like there was a gang of us that like came
mhm,
through that program. I can't even keep all the names together. Like Taylor Quick was in Anastasia. Like I could, if I said here
mm.
and thought about it, right? Like there were a gang of
Right,
us that kind of just
right.
came through, and all just kids from Arkansas who, like Nicole gave us the container and this
Mm,
really intensive conservatory training, like
mm,
as singers, dancers, and actors, that
mm.
just like really made us like all of a sudden competitors, you know, on a much programs and like everything else, and then finding our way into the city and then trying to help each other, you know, in terms
Mhm,
of community and whatnot. And so
mhm,
so that's what it was, and that's what that transition was, you
mhm,
know, a moment to be able to to start understanding that there was more than just the film and TV side of things. And that was really important because as a kid, I didn't understand all of this stuff. I just knew I wanted to perform. I didn't understand like the difference between the two. And then what was great was once I started doing shows at the Arkansas Rep, it gave me a whole nother education in a different way, because when you're 17, 18 and you're backstage with like, and I don't mind saying this because I'm not talking out of school, like a bunch of jaded 30s, 40 somethings who are like between their Broadway show or like haven't booked something in a couple of years. That's a very particular way to like get introduced to this industry, because there's people who, I worked with, like, God rest his soul, not on the bitter side, just like amazing human being, Eric LaJuan Summers, like who's now since passed away, and was such a dear heart and mentor.
Such a dear
I
heart.
met when I was 19, and like we were doing Smokey Joe's Cafe and like at the Arkansas Rep, and he was like between gigs. It's before Motown, and like he was like between Wedding Singer, and it's like I got to be around people like that at a really young age, like Krisha McCarno, shout out to Krisha, who was the original Squeak in the original Color Purple musical, right? Like I met Krisha when I was like 18, 19 and have like known these people, and they've been in my life for a long time. And so that was the beauty of transitioning to that world, was that even though I hadn't yet found my own way to New York and started doing the other things at that level, I've been working with and around those kind of folks from really young, and I soaked up their wisdom whenever I could, which helped me ultimately transition away from doing musical theater stuff earlier, because I was watching them, traverse and travail all the things that they were dealing with, and was like, I don't know that I want to deal with all of that. And I also was watching them start thinking about how they could pivot into other things, and I was like, what if I start thinking about that pivot sooner? Which is how, like, in my 20s, I ended up founding Pyramid and moving into the producing and directing world.
Yes. And thank you for evoking the name of Eric LaJuan Summers. I mean, let me tell you something. That person gave a performance in Motown, if I may. God rest his soul. Ooh.
I know. I mean, I used to sit in the wings every night and listen to him sing I Who Have Nothing, for people who know the Smokey Joe. I'll start crying if I think too hard about it. And to get to sit in the wings every night, 8 times a week for that summer that we were doing that show together, and hear him sing the mess out of that song. Like, I think there's still video of it out there somewhere on Facebook or something. Like, what an education.
What an education.
Yeah.
And I just love that you are so present to the fact that, like, it was such an education. And
100%.
I mean, gosh.
And then just, a year or two later, when he was doing Motown on Broadway, I got to go and take my mom and surprise her and take her backstage. And she knew them because they had been there in Little Rock doing this show. And I was in college. At the time that I did that show, I think I was like finishing my last year of school or something. Like I was in the summer between like my last year of undergrad or whatever. So then a few years later, when I was like doing my own thing, as an actor, professionally, I was in the city, and like I'd go and they like invited me backstage. Like the first time I ever went backstage for a Broadway show was Eric and Krisha. Like they were the ones who took me. The first time I ever stepped foot on a Broadway stage was when they were doing Motown, and they let me come backstage. Like, because I was just this kid from Little Rock who they knew, who had been like, backstage with him like 2 or 3 years earlier at that point. And so again, this was my life in education. And I got that wisdom that to soak up from people, again, God rest his soul, like Eric and Krisha and those folks early in my career, to help color everything that is me,
Love that so much. Thank you for those names. Thank you for celebrating these wonderful people. You've already touched on it, but I want to have you talk a little bit about finishing high school and going into college. Sure. Did you go to college? Where did you go to college? What was that experience like?
So here's my thing about college. Yes, I went to college. I went to Drake University, which is in Des Moines, Iowa, of all places. And the thing about college was my parents at that point in my life, because of everything else I just explained to you about how I came up, my parents at that point were kind of fed up and were like, listen, little boy, we need you to like sit down. We really want you to get a degree and get your education. So they forbade me from applying to any schools in like New York, Chicago, like anywhere near a major market. They were like, nope, because we know you. And they knew that I would have just been like auditioning and probably wouldn't have finished school.
Right.
And they're right? Like knowing myself, like there's no way in the world I could have gone to college in a city like Chicago or New York or something like that, and not just been like in every freaking EPA at that point in my life.
Everything.
Like
Exactly. At that point. Yeah.
I was like a machine. Like I was like really like
Mm-hmm.
after a thing, and like had been around these
Mm-hmm.
people. And when you're like young and meeting folks like the folks I was just talking, it's like you want to
You
feel
want to
like, no,
be in
I
it.
can work at
Yeah.
this level.
Yes.
If in my off time I'm working at this level, that means I should. And so like my brain was wired in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents saw that to their credit, and was
To their
like,
credit.
nope. And so they were like, find programs, because it was really important to me at the time in my head to have a BFA. I thought, I will never work if I don't have. And so I found, this BFA musical theater program at Drake, which, full disclosure, my father went there on a track scholarship, but had never like been back to visit or like didn't really care about it and have any real whatever. But he was like, it's a reunion. You want to go with me? And it was at the time, it felt like my only chance to go to school out of state, because again, I'm from Little Rock. Like most people don't really leave like that.
Right,
And so I thought if I wasn't able to go audition and get into one of these bigger, fancier places, that was it. And so Drake was really my only shot to get out of Arkansas, is what it felt like. And so that's how I ended up going to Drake. And I did, crazy stuff like 21 hours every single semester there, and I graduated with 2 degrees. I got that musical theater degree, and I also got a degree in public relations, and it was a really intense experience. And it was also the first time I'd ever dealt with like abject, just like straight up racism, like good old fashioned racism, in a way that I never encountered growing up in Little Rock, because I just like, first of all, it's too many of us. You couldn't do nothing like that in Little Rock, like versus like in Des Moines. Like the first time I ever, like someone just randomly walking down the street, I'm minding my business, calling me the N-word, like ever, like that, stuff like that.
Yes, yeah.
Like I was like, wait, what just happened? Like my brain couldn't process. I was like, what? And then it happened many, many other times. And so, so that's how undergrad happened. And then after undergrad, I ended up staying in, I took a job at Drake, rather. I didn't necessarily stay in Des Moines. I took a job that was an admission counselor and financial aid officer for 4 years, where I got to start a program that I'm very proud of. It's still in existence at Drake, called the Crew Scholars Program, that was specifically meant to help make it possible to better retain students of color. Because during the 4 years there had been horrible retention numbers. Particularly the class below me had seen retention numbers, something crazy like only 29% return from freshman to sophomore year of Black students. And so I got really passionate about that. And so I started working in the admission and financial aid office. And then they gave me a job when I graduated. So that became my day job, which is what I kept and held down for the first like 4 or 5 years out of college, while I was still like auditioning and then eventually starting Pyramid and everything else. But was running, got to help start from an admission standpoint, this program that's still in existence today, that I'm really proud of, that now the numbers of Black and brown student retention has doubled in the now, 8-9 years or whatever since that program's been in existence. So really proud that I got to be a part of founding that, along with 3 other folks at Drake, when I was an employee there. So that was the other part of my life before.
Wow, you did that for 4 years?
Yeah, I did that job for 4 years right out of undergrad. Yeah.
KenMatts, listen, child, I'm just gonna stop and pause and say, like, I'm so full listening to your gorgeous, gorgeous journey and the fullness of it, literally. And it makes me want to just stop and say, like, wow, wow, you've done so many incredible things. And the thing that I think I'm struck by is how it sounds like you've always done many things, like, because you had a whole like acting career as a young person, and yet you had the wherewithal to like still go to college, study something other than theater. Yes, there was musical theater, but there's also public relations, and then go and work in an admissions office, and had like just the passion, I think, is what I'm filled by right now. The passion and the leadership that I'm going to keep saying, and the awareness. I'm so in awe of you and your journey, and how you are moving and have moved through it, and in such a full and comprehensive way. You know what I mean? It's there's nothing one track about it. And I think the thing that I'm really in awe about is like how your mind at that time knew how important it would be to like have all these different experiences. Like, it's just, almost like, how did it fit is almost like, how did all of like performing professionally and being backstage at Arkansas Rep, meeting people like Eric, going to high school, going to college, going to Drake, 2 degrees, like, wow, how did you hold all that?
Um, that's an excellent question. I don't know, honestly.
Mm,
I have always just worked hard and always viewed everything that we're talking about as an opportunity to be of service. And I
mm,
think sometimes people don't fully understand what that means, or they might
mhm,
misconstrue it, but I actually
mhm.
mean it. Like, I
Yeah.
view my job as one of being of service to others. So as an actor, right, I'm in service to the text and to my other
Mhm.
collaborators.
Totally.
As a teaching counselor, I'm in service to those various students and their parents who are trying to make the best decision possible
Mhm,
for,
mhm,
what their future life is. As an
mm,
artistic director, I'm just here to be of service to the various artists, our board, our staff, and others, to ensure that we are being true to our mission,
mm,
and are doing what we're supposed to do. And
mm,
so I don't think of it as, yeah, I'm obviously pretty good at compartmentalizing, but I think of it holistically as like, my job is to be of service is what I
yeah,
view. And so
yeah,
I always kind of view it from like, wherever I am and whatever I'm doing,
yeah.
I'm just here to try to be the best, um, you know, servant possible. And I think that that often, and I want to make sure I'm clear and nuance this, as particularly as a Black person, right, talking about being
Mhm,
of service.
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
there's a nuance here, right, where
Mhm,
I will again
mhm.
acknowledge the pedagogy of where I come from, which is the Black church,
That's right.
and also from, I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity
Mhm,
Incorporated. My
mm,
mother is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. My father
mm,
and my brother are both members of Alpha Phi Alpha. We don't talk
mm.
about that,
We don't talk
but
about that. House divided, but
so,
that's okay. We gonna keep
like,
moving.
but my point is like, my grandmother was like president of her chapter of the NAACP, during the 70s and 80s in her little small town in Arkansas. Like, I really come from a culture and a family of people who don't mess around when it talks about being of service to
Mhm,
others, and view that as my opportunity, because I believe that when you're in service to others, that good energy and that goodwill that you put out in the world will come back to you tenfold. And so that's why I just mind my business and try to be of service.
yay, God. Um, eh, okay, great.
Sorry, I
So,
listen.
no, it's
I'll get the
so
shout boot.
good.
I just have to be honest about it, because
I
it's not that deep
love
to me.
it. Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
recognize all of the what it sounds like and whatnot,
yeah.
and that's
It's just
what it is.
what it
It ain't that,
is.
yeah, it ain't that deep to me. It's like, no,
That's
I'm
fine.
just doing what I'm
I'm
being
just doing the
obedient.
work. I'm being obedient, doing the work and honoring.
And
Yeah,
obedient to my spirit, and
that's
obedient to
right.
what it is,
Right, right, right. Yes, no, I
that
totally get it.
tells me. Yeah. So
I totally get it.
yeah.
All right. So boom, 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 bow, bow, bow. Pyramid. I want to hear you talk about what happened after the 4 years at Drake.
Mhm.
I mean, you've kind of already hit on a lot of this, but
Sure.
you were doing some professional things and working as an actor in and out of the city. But let's get to like how Pyramid was founded. Like, when did that happen, and from there on, what happened
So
after
during
Pyramid?
that 4-year period, that overlaps with Pyramid's founding.
Got it.
So
Yep.
and that's why Pyramid is a summer theater to this day, because when I
Mhm.
had the most time and
Mhm.
availability was in the summer months
Summertime.
when
Uh-huh.
school was, and that was also true of many of the other co-founders who were in grad school and other things at the
Mhm.
time, right?
Mhm.
So Pyramid got started around the same time as this 4-year period post, as an admission counselor, I'm saying.
Mhm. Mhm.
And essentially Pyramid got started because, God, I mean, a couple different things. Essentially, I had been living and working in and out of Des Moines and other places around the Midwest at that period for
Mm,
going on like
mm,
years, give
mhm,
it all encompassing. And when it was all said and done, and around like I guess this would have been like 5th or 6th year in town, some people came to me and were like, with these two white boys actually named Zach Manheimer and Matt McIver came to me, and they had started this organization called the Des Moines Social Club, and were like, what do you think about doing an August Wilson play here in Des Moines? And I
mm.
just kind of looked at them and I laughed. I was like, who was like, who's gonna be in it? I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I was not convinced. I was like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? And so long story short, we ended up producing, to our knowledge, and as we've been able to fully verify at this point after many years, the first ever fully produced August Wilson play in the state of Iowa. And it really started with my production of Fences that
Wow.
um, it came about because, so again, full circle with August as well, came about because these two gentlemen asked me what I thought about it, and I laughed in their face and was like, I don't think so. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and then I pulled a cast together, and then they gave me a little bit of seed money, and I went to these two amazing Black women who are major community members and givers in town, who I had built relationships with through a church connection and being Drake alums. And I said, they've given me this little small budget. They gave me $10,000. It's like seed money to try to do this production at this little place. And I said, this is the first time we will have seen August Wilson's work here in this state, in this city. I was like, it's really important to me that we can do it in its full glory. And so those two amazing women who later on became Pyramid's chair and vice chair, like to bring that full circle, two amazing Black women, Renee Hartman, Rosemary Parson, give them credit for that.
Yes.
They looked at me and they were like, we're going to help you raise more money. And that was how I learned how to be a producer and learn how to fundraise. It's like they just started putting me in front of their other rich friends. They wrote a check themselves and said they were in. And then before I knew it, I'd raised like $40,000 or $50,000 to like do this show at a much higher quality than what we were able to do before. And that really is kind of the founding of Pyramid. And then over time, there's a group of us. So there's 7 founders in total of Pyramid. And that's myself, Freddie Fulton, another Little Rock boy, shout out to Freddie, Tiffany Johnson, Claudine Cheatham, Alexis Davis, Nana Coleman, and Jeray Breon Holder, former name now Montserrat, when he was a co-founder of Pyramid. So the 7 of us. And that was just a combination of like, it had been the 7 of us in and out, of making things prior to of deciding to actually start a company. And then things started from there. And now 10 years on, it's still going on without me. And I ran it for the first 10 summers on, I should be clear. It'll be its 10th summer this upcoming year. And I ran it for the first 5 summers. And then Tiffany took over in 2018 when I left to go to Williamstown. So, yeah.
I'm just so grateful that you exist. I'm just gonna give me a second to get this out of my body. That you exist, KenMatts. I feel so grateful that we as a community get to like be on this journey with you. And also I'm actually incredibly grateful to, follow me here, the American theater in a way for cultivating and nourishing you and just the people that you've named, obviously, but there's something I'm thinking I'm getting to where you are now. That's where I'm going. Yeah. And the thing that I'm so effing grateful for right now is you have such a wealth of experience. Yeah. And I'm so glad somebody somewhere sees it.
Well, I think that's true. I hope that's true. I don't know that they all see it. I mean, right? Like, this is the most kind of comprehensive conversation I feel like I've ever had about, all that colors my journey. Because like, even the thing with Pyramid, to be clear, like, so those 4 years wrap up. I start Pyramid technically, I guess, 2 years before I moved to Chicago the first time. So that's me being the producing fellow at the Goodman in 2015. And then going to Brown to get my MFA. All of that was while Pyramid was still in its early infantile stages. So like my entire time at Goodman the first time, if I wasn't literally had work to do in Chicago, I was in my car back and forth to Des Moines. Like all through my time in grad school. And our mutual friend, shout out to Tony, Antonio Michael Woodard, who's one of my classmates from Brown, brilliant actor. Beautiful. Another Alabama State alum. But like me and like my classmates from Brown, like I was moving shows and hiring all of them to come work for Pyramid over the summer because I could jumpstart getting work done with them while I was in school. But I ran Pyramid all through grad school as well. Wow. I was flying back and forth. So like I never had a spring break. I never had, like I was just like, if I didn't have to be at school, and the same was at Goodman, same in undergrad too. Like if I didn't have to, I spent every spring break, like I just been working. So like to your point about the experience, those are the things that people don't see or don't know maybe.
Right. That's
that color, what is this whole life and career had. So
absolutely. Yes. No, thank you for that. And it's so true. And yeah, that's a big part of what I'm doing with Celebrate. What I hope to do with Celebrate is to say, we see the thing that we see, but there's so much that we don't see, right? So what is it that we're not seeing? What is it that we don't know? And you're doing, I just thank you for sharing. I don't even know how you could remember all of this. It's so full, your journey, but and so is a lot of our journeys. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So thank you again for sharing that. I want to move into your decision to become the artistic director at Victory Gardens Theater in Chicago, Illinois. And I just want to give you a sincere and huge round of applause, KenMatts, and a sincere thank you, brother. Thank you, God, for you and for your decision to do this. And so I just want to talk a little bit about how it's going, hold space for you, and like just celebrate you in this role.
I mean, well, first of all, to kind of give people the full trajectory of it, I think it's important to talk about it in relationship to how it all happened, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Which is I left Pyramid in 2018 while I was still a student at Brown. And that was because I had a kind of crazy summer where a couple of things happened. First, I got to assist after like begging my way into a project. I got to assist Lee Brewer, God rest his soul, on Gospel at Colonus in the park. In the summer of 2018. And after crazy sort of events happened, I don't even know if you know this story, LA. I ended up in the Gospel at Colonus and ended up making my park debut on accident as an actor because things were kind of going a little haywire with that process. And so they ended up putting me on the show. So what happened was because of that, after having had this kind of crazy summer where I done a couple of different things, including an internship or a fellowship rather at Williamstown, while also still running Pyramid. And then I had this one gig that was supposed to be like a 1 week, 2 week thing to assist Lee on this remount. I ended up staying in New York for like 2 or 3 weeks longer and going back to school for my final year late. So it created this window of opportunity for me to spend more time making more connections in New York and spending time with people who I had just met at Williamstown as well, right? So what ended up happening was that happened. I go back to school. I'm directing my thesis at Brown, which is Tick, Tick, Boom. I directed the direction of Tick, Tick, Boom. And during the rehearsal process, I get an email asking me to interview for the job as producing director at Williamstown. Actually, that's not true. Forgive me. It was the first email was asking me to just have a conversation about a different role that was education related. And I went into that interview once I'd learned that at the time, GM and other producer was leaving. I had all this experience at that point as executive director of Pyramid. And I had my time at Goodman where I'd learned all this GM stuff where I was like, actually, I'm interested in the other role. So that's a story of how I ended up leaving Brown early. I closed my thesis on December 9th, moved to New York that same night, started my job at Williamstown on December 10th, and then had to use a vacation day 6 months later to graduate from Brown. And my time at Williamstown was, there's an LA Times article about it. You could read that. I'm not getting into all of that today. But it became very clear very quickly that that was not going to be a good fit for me long term. I was the first ever Black employee ever in their 60 whatever year history, full time at that point. And it was a kind of hellish experience. And so I left and took a job at Goodman, where they were gracious enough to like allow me to return back to be their associate producer. And I knew that job was always going to be temporary because candidly, it paid so much less than the job that I had just left. And also because they were still kind of clearly figuring out some things structurally. So I always knew that it was like a chance for me to like do my freelance work and be there. And then for people who know, Victory Gardens went through a very nasty kind of public transition of leadership with, one of the two predecessors of mine in leadership kind of leaving in a very nasty way where there were protests and people, literally outside with, signs and writing letters and whatnot. I was not involved or privy to any of that because I was over at Goodman minding my business, candidly, but I knew what was going on. And then when it became time to interview, I was like, well, all right. I knew that coming back to Goodman was always likely going to be mostly temporary. And so I was like, why not just throw my hat in the ring for this thing? And it was a 6-month, really intense process, like 5 rounds in total, I think, like over the course of 6 months, like a really long kind of intense process of like a lot of stop and start, not hearing anything in between. And then finally getting through that whole process and getting this job and being named as the AD. And now it's a year. It was a year ago last week since they announced it that I've been in this job, which is crazy to say. And this first year has been a journey. I think, and I'm gonna get myself in trouble. Let me just say this. I think this first year has been a lot of me doing a lot of work to repair the relationships and the harm within the community. I did a listening tour where I met individually with 246 people and listen and took the time to better understand what their issues were, the things they had experienced at this institution over the last 48 years. I spent a lot of time apologizing for things on behalf of the institution that weren't my fault, and just holding space for people. And I think I was able to, one conversation at a time, slowly repair this institution's reputation and also create space for artists to feel like this is a good space for them to be able to come and make work in again. And I'm very proud of that. And I think this first year has been evidence of that. And I think candidly, the other thing that I can say, because I'm known for just being a straight shooter and normally oversharing and telling too much of the truth and getting myself in trouble. I think the last frontier right now is our board in terms of getting them, kind of whipped into shape and up to speed. Because I'm feeling pretty good about where we are with artists and staff right now, and have a little bit more work to do on that other front to feel like it's a space that's going to continue upholding all the promises that it's supposed to, be upholding. So that's my very candid and tactful way of talking about how it's going so far.
I love the candid and tactful way of talking about it. And I'm just so inspired by you, KenMatts. I'm just grateful and inspired and thankful. And I want to say, or maybe say that I am here for you as you do this really, really deeply personal and important work. Personal in the sense that you're dealing with people and having to have these one meetings at a time that you talk about. I really love that. I am lifting you, and always, every time I think of you, I send you vibrations, I send you love, I send you energy and upliftment. And I think I speak for others when I say a lot of us feel the same way. But I want to also take this moment to ask you, I think I asked you this before when we first met, how can we love you and hold you and take care of you as you do so much for us and for the American theater and your organization?
Well, you're kind. And I remember when you asked this question, when we were in a different space, and you would likely not surprise you that I'm going to give the same answer I gave before, which is I think that the biggest thing is grace. And what I mean by that is that as leaders of color, taking on these predominantly white institutions, I think that's the thing people may not realize is that though I am in leadership, Victory Gardens is still a predominantly white institution. That is true for so many of my other colleagues who are leaders of color. And I think that what feels most important in the ways in which people can celebrate, support, aid us, help us, hold space for us, and also, at the same time, and which I think is important, hold us accountable as well for our own actions within these leadership roles, is particularly, and I'm gonna be really candid about it, for our other artists of color, and in particular, knowing that we are navigating many things that we can say, sometimes publicly, many things that we can't, most things we can't say publicly as leaders of color who are trying to figure out how to make these spaces better and make these spaces feel like homes for all different types of people to be able to come and feel safe. And I don't mind being candid and honest and saying that is not easy. It's quite hard. And I think the biggest thing I always ask people for is the grace of being yo, I'm not perfect. I will mess up, and I will also be the first one when I mess up to be yo, I messed that up. I'm sorry, my bad. It will be the first to say it, right? And then on the flip side of that, there are other things sometimes that institutionally might be going on that because I'm the most public facing person, people might assume it's me or that I whatever. And I have to sometimes then play politics because I can't really say anything about it. And I have to be you were correct. And that might be the response. And I need some people to read between the lines on that too. And help a brother out, frankly, when you see me, responding in that way where I'm yes, you are correct. Or just acknowledging that what you might have said is true. Trust and believe that if it were up to me, likely if it were something truly within my own power to change, I would do it. And I think that, the last thing that I'll say is that recognize I'm not playing with the same tools. The white flight of donors, the white flight of board members, the white flight of supporters and other people to these institutions. When you have someone like me, because anti-Blackness is so real, right? I'm not, people are assuming oh, you're at Victory Gardens and that means blah, 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 blah. And it's like, actually, let's not assume that something that was true before is actually still true now, because the backlash of what it means to also have someone like me in these roles is such that that means that I'm not always playing with the same tools, you know? And I think it's important to know that a big part of my job is I'm having to find new tools. I'm having to create some tools in certain cases. I'm having to go shop and find different kinds of tools that people ain't normally used to using to like figure out how to make the thing work. And it's like, you know, that great Audre Lorde quote about the master's house and master's tools, like, I had to let them tools go. I don't have them anyway. And you can't just fill that house with the master's tools as it is. I'm having to go find some new tools. And so in my search for those tools, I just need some grace from people as they understand that, like, I'm having to go make some stuff up anew. I'm actually having to reinvent the wheel on a few things. And to be clear and candid, there's a lot that I don't have to reinvent the wheel on, thankfully, because of colleagues and people elsewhere. But even in trying to implement that within each organization is unique, it's different. So I can't just even utilize things from other places. I can use them as inspiration, but I have to figure out the right size version for us institutions. And so, you know, like, I just have to break it down like this, because I think people forget that, like, it's still an institution and a business. And I am just like a Black man within it who's on a contract as well. Like, y'all can be looking at this institution and what we do or don't do just as side-eyed and sideways as I am half the time. And I'm just here so I don't get fined in some cases, trying to mind my business and use what tools I can to make sure that we are a space that is open, that is creative, and that is safe for as many different artists as possible. And that's the only thing I care about, but I'm one part of a many multi-pronged thing, right? That doesn't mean that everything is just gonna go the way that I want it to go. That shouldn't be how it works anyway. So all of that to say that in terms of support and everything else, I say grace first and foremost, and patience, because like it's been a year. It's going to take me at least 3 to even see demonstrable change, I predict, in terms of how this thing is different. And there's only one me, and I got to make sure I feel good and can survive that 3 years, and then feel like I'm in a good enough place to survive beyond that. And I may or may not be, because I promise you, I'm still going to choose myself every time over these institutions.
Get off my phone! Get your ass off my phone!
That's just the truth of it. I don't,
because I'm gonna choose me every time.
I am, like, because at the end of the day, having been in all these various different roles that I've been in this business, if I've learned nothing else, it's like they will use your Black ass up and move on before it's, you know, before you could blink. And that's true in this role, just like it is when you're in that chorus role and you twist that ankle and they're figuring out how to bring in the new swing, just like it's true when, you know, they drop you as the writer on the thing, just like it's true when they drop you as a director. Like, let's be clear. Like, I have a contract with this institution. I am not the institution. I am KenMatts Martin.
Get off my phone. KenMatts Martin, get off my phone. I'm done.
I just have to talk about it honestly. Like, I don't know any other way to do it. Like, sorry.
So, not sorry. Listen, oh my God. You know, I was hungry at the beginning of this interview, but now I'm like so full that I might not eat for 3 days. Listen, child, KenMatts, this is exactly one of the reasons why I was like, I have got to make space for this human being. I've got to hold space for you and this incredible voice, as I talked about at the very beginning in the introduction of you, and your mind, and your energy. And I am so thankful to be on this journey with you. Thank you for that gorgeous, gorgeous sharing, and all the wisdom and the gems and the gifts, my child. Hey, God, you just gave us so much. And yes, and just know that we hear you and I hear you, and thank you for that, because that was a beautiful, you gave us a lot. Okay. In the spirit of, because you and I can talk forever, child. I can take up your whole day. I'm gonna wrap this thing on up. Ooh, Lordy. Really quickly, I woke up this morning and I was thinking about our conversations today and about Celebrate. And I want to have just a quick moment. It's meant to be lighthearted, but we'll see where it goes. Where we just celebrate together, celebrate one highlight in your journey. It can be any highlight, it can be about anything, and one low light. I know.
All right, let me do the low one first so we can end on a positive note. How about that?
Yeah.
Low light on my journey. Oh man. I think the low light, I'll do a I'll try to do a comprehensive one, which is
Yeah.
like the low lights on my journey that always come up for me are the ones where I feel like, how do I say, I'm really big on communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a low light for me that I can think of that is related to so many different parts of my journey in life, is thinking about those moments where, people have maybe not been as patient as possible,
Yeah. Yeah.
when trying to communicate things
Yeah. Yeah.
to one
Yeah.
another. And when I
Yeah.
think about all the very low lights, it's from like when I was 13 and booked a Disney pilot and got hit with a non-compete, and like lack of communication, all the way up to like from my time at Williamstown to my time at you name it, you name it, you name it. So that's a low light for me. It's like, oh, what happens when we are transparent and can like really just be honest about all the things happening? That's what it feels like a low light. Highlight, I would say, using a VG example this year, I'm very, very, very proud of Ignition, which is a program that used to be a festival here at VG that I've turned into a year-round new play program, where this year we've done 5 of the 6 of them that are scheduled already, and 3 of them are off-site. And we did one in residence at Chicago State. Shout out to an amazing Black school in Chicago. We did another one in Bronzeville at the Annie B. Jones Performance Center, and another one in Andersonville at a gym owned by a Black trans woman that is all about inclusivity of LGBTQIA folks. And it was a play about body dysmorphia in the gay community that we put up in that space. The play that we did in Bronzeville was about capitalism and Black folks navigating predominantly white workspaces. This play called Tokens of Promise that we did in Bronzeville at the Annie B. Jones Center, which focuses on those kinds of issues. And then at Chicago State, we did this musical Exodus, a workshop of it that got to be in residence with these amazing students at Chicago State who were studying history and theater. And so when I think about a highlight for me, it's the fact that all of those readings have been sold out, and we're doing the work that I care the most about, which is getting out into the city of Chicago, and out of our little enclave that is Lincoln Park, which is mostly white and affluent, where Victory Gardens is literally situated. Because I'm so sick of people acting like, oh, how are we gonna get more Black people to come see the plays and everything else? I'm like, do you know how far the South or West Side is from Lincoln Park? Like, do you know what that commute is like? Also, do they feel comfortable when they get up here and safe? Like, we're gonna have to go out and
You're gonna
make
have to
them
go to
feel
them.
like,
That's how.
this is a space that will be safe for them when and if they come there, but I don't actually care if they come there. So that's a big highlight for me, is that we've been able to do that work over the last year, and I'm very proud of it. So
Amazing. The way I wrap these conversations up is by asking 3 questions. Here we go. Okay. Number 1, what does it mean to you to be celebrated?
I don't know. I can't answer that one. I don't like to be celebrated. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know that I like or enjoy that as much as I enjoy celebrating others. So I don't know. That's my answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. What or who do you celebrate?
Oh my God, my ancestors and the many people whose shoulders and midst we stand on. And the elders in my life. I'm a real huge proponent and lover of acknowledging and loving on our elders. There's so much wisdom there, and people just count their viewpoint and what they have to say. And I'm always like, please call that auntie, that uncle, that grandmama, that whoever in your life, that mentor, that person who, probably doesn't get a lot of phone calls anymore. I like to celebrate them because they're a wealth of knowledge and wisdom that if you listen to it, you might learn something. Yeah. So that's who I celebrate.
I love that. Thank you for that beautiful reminder. And finally, KenMatts, what do you do to celebrate you?
Oh, Lord. I mean, again, I'm gonna be too candid and too honest. Like, yo, I'm a pretty simple guy. I just like to be left alone, frankly, in terms of celebrating myself. Like, I like to watch TV and turn my phone off and not be bothered. I'm also in the state of Illinois where, a young little edible is legal, and I can go grab one of those from the dispensary. So that's how I like to celebrate myself, is go have a nice little gummy and go watch a stupid TV show and not be worried about these people in this theater industry. Because I'm going to tell you what else, y'all not going to kill me
That's
Y'all
it.
laughing.
That's
To
it.
me, like
That's
this is
it.
my job. I'm very passionate and I love what I do, but I'm gonna tell you what I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna let the American theater kill me. So
Okay.
when I think
Not
about
gonna die
celebrating
for it.
myself, yeah, when I think about celebrating myself, it's all about like me just being by myself, minding my business, because that's my favorite place to be. Sorry, I'm too honest.
No,
I don't
I
know what
love it. No,
it's just
it's perfectly
true.
honest. It's perfect. It really is perfect.
It's
Listen,
true.
clearly, I celebrate you. I love you, KenMatts Martin. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so glad that we get to be on this journey together. I know I've said it a million times. And I also just feel like I want to say, you mentioned the elders, which is so gorgeous. That's so perfect because you also talked about age earlier in this conversation. And I just want to say that you, to me, feel like an elder.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I am not.
I
I
know,
would.
I know that we might look at that and be
Honor.
like,
I think I get what you mean, but that's an honor that I will one day hopefully be able to be bestowed. But in the meantime, I
absolutely,
just want to sit at the
absolutely,
feet of those many elders out there in my
totally,
life,
yeah,
mentors,
yep,
and those who
yep,
passed on, in particular, some of which we've talked about today. God
yeah.
bless them, keep them.
Mhm.
So yeah, yeah.
I'm so glad we did this. Thank you for saying yes to this. Thank you for trusting me to do this. And so much love for you, so many blessings your way. And I'm just so glad that we exist at the same time.
Thank you, thank you. God bless you, man. And listen, like I want to celebrate you real quick. If can I do that before we go? Like
Sure,
let's celebrate you.
absolutely.
Like seriously, like this is such a beautiful thing that you've built, this lovely platform,
Mm,
and also the way that you are able to share your spirit and energy, which
mm,
I've always appreciated even
mm,
from afar.
mm,
It means a lot to have this space because there's so much nasty in this freaking
mm,
business,
mm,
in
mm,
particular that
mm,
moments of celebration of others and of work are really important. So thank you for this platform. I want to celebrate you. So yeah,
Thank you,
you
KenMatts.
celebration.
Thank you, KenMatts. Thank you. Thank you, KenMatts. I appreciate that. I receive it. I appreciate that very much. Take good care. We'll do this again soon. We'll do something else again soon, and
I
just
hope
keep
so.
being well. And it was so good to see you in person a couple days ago. So
I know we got to
it
see
was
each other in
so
person.
great.
So
Exactly.
excited. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Take good care.
Bye bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Wait.